Good morning, everybody. I am here with the wonderful Louise Taylor. And honestly, Louise, I am so happy that you've joined me because there's so much I want to talk to you about and so many subjects that we can cover. But firstly, Louise, I just would like you to give a little bit of background on how you came to write, which we're going to talk about a lot today, this amazing book, Sweats, Frets, but No Regrets. Tell me a little bit about your background, what you do and how you came to write this amazing book.
Oh, thanks, Denise, for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. It's so I'm Louise and I'm a GP and I have been postmenopausal for some years now. And so I decided to write the book because I wanted people to understand the symptoms of the menopause a bit more, and also once they understand the symptoms, they're going to be so much better able to sort of ride the menopause. But also it sort of extended itself then into being a lot about the research that I'd read myself and more current research on how maybe to live through the menopause as healthily and as happily as possible. And that may involve adding things in addition to just simply changing diet, exercise, etc. So for me, it was a really important thing to be able to let people understand the symptoms. I appreciate that at the moment we're actually in a beautiful peak phase of menopause where a lot of people are talking about it, but actually when I wrote the book there wasn't that much sort of chat about it, and I do know there's lots of other good books out there. I haven't actually read them because I probably end up writing their book, but I think there's, for me it was just a case of just being able to offer a little bit more information into the sort of market and see, just to help women ride this a little bit more easily, because for some it's a super turbulent time. For others they just wing it, but it's probably more the turbulent, to be honest. So that was sort of the reason behind it.
And so coming from a GP standpoint, did you feel that you wanted to, because there's a lot of stuff like really good, it's very clear information, and I really like that. It's a real easy read, but there's a lot of really good information. So what was it from your medical kind of standpoint that you wanted to sort of either clarify or, what points did you want to get across in the book?
So I think for me, understanding what the symptoms are is really useful, because I think a lot of women are sideswiped by the menopause and they don't even realise it's the menopause. And so a lot of other things get blamed, often their partner, often their children, often their job, and I think, just using myself as an example to sort of anchor it, I actually developed anxiety as my first symptom of the menopause. And that for me was a real, it was a total bolt out of the blue, because I'd never been an anxious person. And so suddenly finding myself sort of, really sweating the small stuff and not, and still having periods, in fact. So, but I was in the position where I was just like, oh, feel a bit anxious. Ooh, probably the menopause. Whereas most women out there who aren't GPs or medically trained wouldn't necessarily put two and two together. And there are lots of those sort of symptoms that are, are menopausal symptoms, but actually unless you know that, you don't. So for me, medically, that was a big share. And again, at the moment, you and I are living in a menopause bubble, aren't we?
Yes.
Where actually, how could you not know the symptoms of the menopause? Because, every Instagram feed's got them, every, Facebook page has got them. But actually, lots of women don't know that. They're not living in our bubble at the moment. And so trying to sort of get out that information to them is really important, because lots of women don't come and see their GPs about it. So you'd think they would, but they don't.
Well, because I guess some people feel, and I have clients like this myself, who don't feel like it's severe enough to mention, but it is affecting their everyday life, probably more than they realise. And then when it gets to a point where it suddenly feels out of control, that's when they might do something. But often that, it's more of an uphill climb, isn't it? It's not that there's, of course, there's always something you can do. But so for your own experience, when you started to feel anxious and, was it sort of over everyday stuff, as you said, you're sweating the small stuff, or, you know, did it creep up on you slowly? How did it manifest with you?
So it was a sort of, it was a gentle creep. You're absolutely right. You know, you go from being someone who, you know, like as I say in the book, you know, I've always been like the Dalai Lama. You know, well, nothing about me is like the Dalai Lama, to be honest with you. But his creed of, you know, if it's something that you can, you know, you're worrying about something, if it's something you can do something about, crack on and do it, and if you can't, then stop worrying about it, sort of thing. That's always been me. But actually, no, suddenly I found myself sort of worrying about my health, my other people's health. You know, I think probably my GP notes went from never seen, never seen, never seen to suddenly like, ooh, who is this, you know, doctor who keeps turning up in our surgery? Because, you know, I was suddenly like worried about this, worried about that. I thankfully didn't end up sort of with panic attacks or, you know, full blown sort of anxiety, but, you know, it was just that background. And of course you change what you do. And, you know, and of course I'm working as a GP, and suddenly I found myself questioning all of my decisions. So I'd then be going back over my surgery, looking to see, did I do that right? Then looking something up and checking things. And before you know it, you know, my job's taking double the time because of that. And I think, you know, that translates across probably into lots of women's lives. You know, they suddenly don't want to put their hand up in a meeting because they think, you know, am I going to say something stupid? You know, or, you know, they're doubling up how much time they're doing. They feel like actually they won't go and knock on their boss's door and ask for a pay rise anymore because actually they deserve it. You know, you've built up all that fantastic confidence, and then suddenly, bang, it's gone.
And that's really, really tough, isn't it? And you know, but if somebody is feeling like that, so somebody's listening to this podcast now and they're feeling like they're kind of on that little path of anxiety, what would you suggest they do?
I mean, I obviously think that going to see a GP is a good starting point, because one of the things that's really important as well is to actually work out what's anxiety related to the menopause, and what's actual true anxiety, because the two things are different. So in my book, I do direct people towards a symptom score, which tells you and helps you sort of work out what's menopause and what's anxiety or what's depression. And if you hit over a certain level on this score, then actually chances are you actually have got anxiety, not just menopausal anxiety. And the two things are, you know, do actually require a different sort of look at it. I mean, you know, obviously I'm, you know, shouting out for my own team, but I really think midlife women or women coming up to that point, if they're starting to get symptoms of any like that, you know, check in with your GP. Why not? You know, they probably haven't seen you for 20 years since your children have grown and flown. So, you know, they're not going to be rolling their eyes. They're just going to be pleased as punch that they've got the opportunity to make a difference and support you. So that would be certainly my first point of contact.
So I love the idea of that. So in the book, when you're talking about this kind of the questions and the scoring, what kind of questions would you be looking at to sort of suggest that somebody is suffering more from anxiety rather than menopausal symptoms?
So in terms of it really depends how much it's affecting your day in some ways. So actually, if you are now not leaving the house because you're so anxious, chances are that's not just straightforward menopause anxiety. You know, if it is that you are starting to, you know, start washing your hands 20 times and lock the door 15, etc., then again, that's not going to be menopause. So I think for me, a rule of thumb is that actually, if it's really stopping you do a lot of things, then chances are it's pushed beyond. And it might have started with menopause anxiety, and then, you know, it's built with. But anxiety per se generally has a sort of trigger point, you know, that you can recognise where it's come from, the starting point of it, which is why NLP practitioners are so brilliant at sometimes resolving it, and hypnotherapists as well, and, you know, cognitive. I really recommend cognitive behaviour therapy, even for menopausal anxiety. But actually, you know, so yeah, for me, I think if it's starting to impact on your day-to-day living, then chances are it's probably moved a little bit further than just I'm, you know, feeling a little bit, I don't really want to do this, but I'll probably still go and do it. Whereas actually, I don't want to do this. Actually, I'm going to stay at home, and I'm going to stay at home tomorrow and the next day and the next day. It's probably moved into something different.
So how would you treat somebody? So if somebody came to you with those symptoms, what would you do? And I'm sort of edging towards, we'll talk about this in a second, HRT, because we spoke earlier, Louise, about and I loved Davina McCall. It was an amazing program. When she did her, I think it was an hour-long documentary about menopause. But I had a lot of clients still that had very unanswered questions. And, you know, the HRT thing is still very confusing to women. And, you know, so how would you treat somebody who came to you with those symptoms, and what are your thoughts on HRT? Sorry, there's two questions there.
No worries. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because HRT has been through quite a pendulum swing. So it was at a point where lots of women were being started on it and basically, you know, stay on it for 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And then there was a big study that really just drove it into the ground, and the Daily Mail, you know, was all over it, and it was going to give you breast cancer, and it's going to make you have a stroke, and it was going to do all of this. And so, of course, you know, everyone was burnt by that, women and doctors together.
Yeah.
So you know, doctors particularly, interestingly enough, you know, we were suddenly told that, you know, if someone had to have it, just give it them the shortest period of time, and really, you know, make that consultation as difficult as possible, was pretty much the, you know, I mean, obviously didn't put it quite like that, but you know, that's the message we were getting. Whereas actually, as more studies came through, and that study was sort of really picked to pieces, you know, in about 2015, certainly in the UK, you know, big guideline came out that said, actually, no, go for it, you're okay. If women are symptomatic, then start up HRT. And there wasn't even the caveat of the shortest amount of time, the smallest dose, it was just started up. And so I'm a fan, absolutely. I think it's fantastic. I will be taking it till I die. You know, so I think that, you know, and it probably doesn't come across in the book very much, because I really wanted to offer an even-handed opportunity to get, you know, understand the symptoms, and also recognize that there are a heap of lifestyle things you can do to support yourself. And then at the end of that, you're probably going to have more questions, and it may be then you go down the route of adding HRT, you know, maybe seeking out an Ayurvedic doc or a homeopath or a nutritionist, or, you know, whatever, to support you then through the rest of that journey. But I don't think one goes without the other. I think you have to have those lifestyle changes, or the opportunity to make changes if you want to. And then add the other as well. So I tend to do it in a sort of double-handed approach. It's a case of, okay, if you are eating a load of rubbish and you are open to making some changes to that, then not only might we improve your menopause symptoms, but actually we'll probably reduce your risk of cancer and have you live a little bit longer in a healthier way. So, you know, I think that for me is the opportunity that we're being delivered when we're seeing women in their midlife, because hopefully we've got another 40 years ahead of us. And so it doesn't really, you know, it does matter what we've done already, but actually if we make changes now too, we'll make huge changes and big changes to, you know, so, you know, lots of women don't know that, you know, weight is not just it's not it is a self-esteem issue, of course it is, and we all feel shocking when we've gained weight, and we all find it really difficult to lose weight, much more so in the menopause. But weight is associated with cancer. So being overweight is associated with an increased risk of cancer. So if we can lose weight, then we do change that risk. And actually that's something we all want to be part of, isn't it?
And I talk about it from my point of view, very much on an energy standpoint as well. So, you know, if a client, because, you know, an average weight is different for everyone. But as long as somebody is feeling really energized and alert and all those things that sometimes going into menopause you don't, you know, people can feel completely on the floor and very flat, you know, which isn't it, you know, the enjoyment of life starts to disappear when you feel like that. So this is the kind of thing that I would focus on almost more than the symptoms of the menopause. You know, it'd be like, right, let's regain the energy, let's regain your va-va-voom for life, you know, and all those things. So explain to me, because many of people that will be listening to this will not understand what HRT is and what it does. So, you know, from a GP point of view, how would you explain? So if I was to come to you and I said, you know, I had X, Y, and Z symptoms, you know, and then you would suggest HRT, how would you explain it to me, and how would you explain that it is safe?
Okay, so in terms of what it is just replacement hormone. So it's estrogen and progestogen, and you can have it in various forms. So you can swallow it, you can have it in patch form, you can have it as a spray, you can have it as a gel. And then the progestogen can again be either in tablets or spray, not spray, sorry, tablet or vaginal tablet or patch. So it's replacing our background level of estrogen. So it's allowing that to be, you know, those receptors all around the body that have been used to having estrogen, they get them back again. It gets it back again. So essentially it's just like having your ovaries in the background still working. The progestogen bit is because if you've got a womb, you need the progestogen in order to protect the lining of the womb from estrogen. So whilst we think probably progestogen is bringing more to the table than just that, that's what it's being added for. It's being added to protect the lining of the womb. So what I would say is to anyone when they're having HRT, that if you've got a womb, you have to have progestogen. So always check your prescription that that's happened, because, you know, we do make mistakes. You know, sometimes we'll hit the wrong button. You know, they're all in a line together. You know, you might end up coming away one time with a prescription for estrogen only. Just check to make sure that progestogen's there if you've got a womb.
Yeah, I was going to say, so how do you know the dosage? Is everybody different? Does everybody need different amounts? And
Everyone
how
is
you're taking it, is that personal preference, or is that something the GP would recommend? Or, you know, how do you know as a patient?
So that's a really good question, actually, because everyone does things slightly differently, and actually you do often have to walk through 2 or 3 HRTs before you hit the one that's right for you. So the first line treatment is transdermal estrogen, so either patch, gel or spray. And that's really important because that's got a slightly less risk of clots on the well, it's got no risk of increased risk of clots on the legs and lungs, which the tablet form does have. Okay. So even though it's slightly pricier and also a little bit of a nuisance, to be honest with you, because some people are just better at taking a tablet every day. Yeah. It is the best way to have that into the system. Okay. And then the progestogen can be by a coil, in fact. So actually lots of women who've used the Mirena coil as their contraception through their sort of 40s can simply extend. And you've got
fly going around my head. Sorry, I am listening, but I'm sort of
dancing too.
Sorry, carry on.
So that's, but you're absolutely right. You will. Some women really suit testosterone. Other women just don't get on with it at all. Some women actually think the Mirena coil is, you know, the devil's work. Others think it's just the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah. And you know, lots of people, doctors themselves, mooch along for ages. I mean, I was just recently, I've realized that my patch is not the right patch for me. Wow. You know, I had it changed because it was just more convenient to have a slightly smaller one, but it's definitely not absorbing to the same level that the other one was, because wow. I started getting lots of joint problems again. Okay. So, you know, so you definitely, so you are allowed to go back to your GP also, yeah. and say, do you know what, this is not right for me. Yeah. Or not, it's not right for me. I'm still symptomatic. Is there an opportunity for change? Yeah. And you know, we can do levels to check to see, you know, is it actually getting into the system? You know, and chances are it isn't. I mean, obviously, I didn't do that because, you know, I was like, yeah, it's not, so I'm just changing it. But yeah. You know, but yeah. So I mean, HRT in terms of sort of risk, the big risk, obviously, everyone sort of thought about was the relative risk of breast cancer. But, you know, if you're overweight, you've got double the risk of breast cancer. Yeah. So, you know, and it's a cumulative you know, whichever is the top thing that you're doing badly, that's the one that wins when it comes to the breast cancer risk. So, you know, so if you're drinking, you know, 14 units of wine, 14 units of alcohol a week, actually you've got a slightly increased risk of breast cancer, more so than the HRT. So again, you've just got to weigh these things up.
It's about your seesaw, isn't it? And this is what I always talk about to my clients. You know, it's about keeping that balance all the time. And, you know, so what I love about you, Louise, is that you know, coming from a medical background, you are really open to nutrition as well, which is, you know, because I know that, you know, this is the reality, that a lot of GPs don't have training in nutrition. And sometimes from my point of view, nutrition is so simple, and this should be the place that people start. So being advised on good healthy lifestyles, you know, and exercising and therapies if you feel like you need it, or, you know, I think we are changing. Life is changing, isn't it? For me, my job is very different now to even 5 years ago, because there's so much, you know, in magazines, in papers, online, about health, lifestyle. It's very trendy, which is great, which helps me massively. And for you, you know, for you to be recommending this to people is music to my ears. And, you know, and there's a lot of really, really good stuff in your book as well, which is a really balanced kind of view of lifestyle, health, and nutrition. But how important do you feel going into those sort of perimenopause years, or you know, or going fully into the menopause, that lifestyle is to people?
I think I think it's top of the tree, to be honest with you. I think, you know, I'm anxious that as the conversation turns more to HRT, that once again that bit of it gets lost. And for me, it's so important, because not everyone can take HRT, and also, you know, HRT mustn't become the solve for then making those other changes. I mean, I know that sounds a bit draconian, but actually we've got this fantastic opportunity. We're at a change point of our lives. You know, lots of women have, you know, their children, who they've expended all that beautiful energy on, you know, they've left home now. So it's time for me time. Yes. And me time isn't selfish. Me time is actually that living the healthiest, longest life. There's no point in living forever if actually you're going to be, you know, I'm going to swear, but, you know, if your body's broken and
miserable,
you know, you're riddled with whatever, and you know, your head just doesn't want to be here anymore. So it is this fantastic opportunity to make a big change, not make a big change, make tiny changes towards a healthier way of feeling. And, you know, there's nothing like being introduced to old age like the menopause. You know, you go from being healthy and active and fit and full of beans to being someone who just wants to lie on the couch eating dairy milk.
We love dairy milk. Everybody loves dairy milk. No, it's true. And I think that, you know, and I've spoken about this in previous podcasts, that some women just feel like they really don't know themselves anymore, and that can be quite depressing. So it's great to hear from both points of view, and I think, and then everybody's more empowered to kind of put together the pieces in the way that they want. And this is what I always say to women: it's about empowering yourself, getting the knowledge. You know, sometimes knowledge can be overwhelming though, so it's great to be having your advice coming from the medical world, but also being really open to the, you know, sort of more the sort of healthy side of life as well. Louise, we're running out of time, and I will see you for weeks, but we are going to have our second episode, so please watch out for episode 2 with Louise Taylor. But Louise, for today, thank you so much for coming on.
No worries, thank you for having me.
Your knowledge is amazing. Thank you so much, and we will speak again very soon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.